A very inspiring, very tragic, but also very revealing look at the life of one of the best big men in professional wrestling history. I'm Charles Recklin with my review of WWE Icons Yokozuna, one of the best documentaries that WWE has produced in quite a while. I was really excited to see this because when I was 11 years old, that's when Yokozuna made his WWE debut. And for a period of years, I was just in awe of the guy. I mean, anybody would be, like, especially a kid, but just seeing how somebody that big had that great a natural timing and could have that many great matches despite being that size, it was absolutely just awe-inspiring to fucking watch him. He was truly one of the best big men ever. Him and Vader are like two of my favorite big men of all time. Just how they could, just how they could move around the ring, the matches they could have. And you have to wonder what would have happened had Yoko been able to get his weight under control. This is not a blame game. I'm not doing that. But that was a big reason as to why his career was cut short. And unfortunately, his life was tragically cut short. 34 years old. Just hearing from his children, hearing from his family, hearing from his colleagues, just hearing the sad, takes like that they had of just hearing how they handled his death and handled his downward spiral before that, as far as his weight. It's just really, really sad. But it did also have some really good, inspiring shit. I'm also going to have a bit of a rant during the middle of it. You probably can guess what I'm going to rant about. But, one of the opening lines, Samoans are no strangers to this business. I mean, you look at the Anoa'i family. I mean, Rodney Anoa'i, Yokozuna. It's the only time I'm going to use his real name. I didn't know the man. But just as a fan, seeing the character Yokozuna, but seeing more of the man behind the Yokozuna persona, you could see how great of a family man he was and what everything meant to him and this success, what it meant to him, how much he enjoyed carrying the lineage of the, Anoa'i family, the Samoan family, like, the wild Samoans, how they helped train him. So much that it really meant a lot to him, and he stayed very humble. He was a stand-up guy. He gave you the shirt off his back if he appreciated you. Taker did have a lot to say because Taker and Yokozuna did work a long program. His sister talked about how he was a good family man, that he was the oldest kid, and that he did skip school. He just kind of was a bit lost. His dad was in the service, and his dad sent him to Offensica to take care of him, and they got him into wrestling. Because they had their school, the Wild Samoans. I mean, their legacy speaks for themselves. And he said, one of them, like, you got to work your butt off. Training was tough. Rikishi talks about the training. Samu talks about that. You get to hear from a lot of people that knew Yoko and, worked in wrestling, and not just WWE, but all over. How that Offensica were like their second dads. They treated them like family, and they respected them as you would respect Offensica. Even now, they could probably beat your ass because they're just that goddamn scary. Yokozuna loved professional wrestling. He started in the Indies as Coquina Maximus, and that was in 87. And I remember him working a little bit in the AWA, the very, very end of the AWA. And him and his girlfriend in 88 had a kid by the name of Justin. And that he was a great dad, that he wanted to make a living in wrestling to help his family. Gerald Briscoe and then Bruce Pritchard talk. Now, Bruce Pritchard, I didn't mind some of the stuff that he had to say here, and then some stuff, it's like he was coming across like the typical jerk that he was, and still is. The bullshit that he is. But anyway, they talk about seeing him and giving him a tryout. How could you not be impressed, Pritchard said. And yeah, Pritchard actually, actually said something intelligent for once. Yoko got an infection in his leg. He was actually supposed to be part of the new head shrinkers, or the head, kind of a new Wild Samoans would be the head shrinkers, and then it was going to be Fatu and Yoko, but it was Fatu and Samu, so Samu got a chance, and that was great. It was great for Samu, and opened the door for them. And then September 1st, 1992, the non-televised show, but the same. Well, it was non-televised at the time, but at least you got to see this footage because this was also the same event where Flair beat Randy Savage for his second WWE Championship run, and would drop it like a month and a half later to Bret Hart on a house show, on a goddamn house show. But anyway, so Slaughter came up with kind of the Yokozuna ideas. Like, well, Vince is like, I got a bunch of Samoans. I want to use this guy. He's really good. He's impressed us, but we have enough Samoans. And Reigns thought it was great to see a family member in that spot, featured in that light. And Mr. Fuji became his manager. We were off to the races. They were doing some really good shit there. I mean, really, it was great shit. I fucking loved watching Yokozuna in the ring. As much as I hated the persona, or it's like as much as I hate him as a heel, I respected him because of how great he could move. Because at the time I was kind of waffling between loving some of the heels. I mean, I love Randy Savage and his feud with Hogan a few years prior. But Yoko, like, you're supposed to hate the monster heel, but you just couldn't help but respect him. And then I would say, by Mania 9 is when I really started to respect him, and you'll find out why here in a bit. Taker, when he came in, it was truly amazing. And yeah, it truly was, because you could see the ability he had, even with that weight. And he was 400-something pounds. 400, maybe 505 pounds. I mean, he might have been built a little bit bigger, but then he got well over that, unfortunately. Austin and Brett. Brett had a lot to say about Yoko because he worked a couple straight WrestleManias with him. Nash and Mark Henry talked about it. Mark Henry talking about seeing him as a kid. Taker begged Vince to let him work with Yoko. Brett, it's like he came along when they needed a monster heel, and he had an aura, and he did have an aura. And Vince's relationship with the Wild Samoans and the Samoan family in general is discussed. Went on for a long time. It's gone back years and years and years. When Vince Sr. owned the WWF, and Vince Jr. was just a wrestling announcer. And, he might have had something to do with promoting some stuff, but still, it was his dad's company. And then backstage, he was different. He was just fun-loving. He, loved to rap, loved to sing in the shower, wrote his own raps. And just, vignette with him eating enough for 20 people, because Yoko did love to eat. He was in a 93 Rumble. The only thing that I ever questioned about the 93 Rumble, which Yoko won, is why did Randy Savage, a veteran, try to pin Yokozuna? I've never understood that. To this day, I still don't understand it. But, I mean, it was a cool visual of Yoko, shooting Savage up off of the mat and, over the ropes. And Savage took it like a champ, as you would expect, because he's Randy Savage, and he was all about putting people over and doing the right thing, unlike Hogan, that I'll talk about here in a bit. But I just never understood why he tried to cover him. But he got a monster push. He took it in stride. He was awestruck, obviously. He would be awestruck, because it's like, you think about starting in the Indies in 87, like late 87, ending days of the AWA, and then he's given this tryout in WWE, and with the Anawahi name and the fact that Offensika trained him, like, you have all this lineage, all this stuff behind him, the man was still in absolute awe, and of course he would be, and great goddamn worker. I can't say enough how fucking amazing of a worker he was. But, at the time, I was pissed that Randy Savage didn't win the Rumble. And I was thinking, oh, God, I said, Brett's going to beat him. Brett's going to beat him. Because Brett was my guy. Of course Brett was my guy. Everyone in the Samoan family, well, I mean, it's like about 200 of them were at Mania 9. And a bunch of them stayed there because I guess they like living there. I mean, they just were all goddamn happy. Reigns was excited. And, a young Roman Reigns. And it was actually good to hear Roman Reigns chime in about this, because he had a lot, as a kid's perspective, but also being in the family lineage, obviously, with the last name, Anawahi, you would think that his perspective, from youth and all that would just add a little bit more to it, and it did. It was nice to hear from Reigns. Brett talked about the second part of the match being skipped over, because part A went great, but then part B was skipped over, either because Yoko was gassed, or maybe it was because Hogan could come out and ruin fucking everything. And let me just say right now, yeah, the tone's going to shift here a little bit. Let me say right now that Hulk Hogan's done a whole lot for professional wrestling, that is, and will always, be locked in with the WWE name. He always will be. I mean, yes, he worked for Turner for a number of years. He worked for the AWA and helped take them to new heights, and Vern helped him out a whole lot. Hogan carried the ball and had been the guy in WWE for a number of years. Here's the thing. He didn't fucking need to be the guy anymore. He turned down a chance to become tag team champion because Bruce Beefcake, apparently, even though he was his friend, teaming with my friend was beneath me, so I didn't want to be that, and he's like, oh, here he comes. That's what Reigns said, and Reigns looked like he was irritated, as he should have been, as everybody was. Brett felt like he was going to, felt like sticking his finger down his throat to throw up. He found out about that just a bit before, I think, like during the weekend, that Yoko was not going to walk out as champion, that it was going to be Hogan. Hogan politicked his way to basically wreck the whole damn thing. It wrecked the entire structure of that company for the next year. Take a look at what they had to do creatively to even try to get back on track after that. The King of the Ring, I mean, I'll talk about this here in a little bit. You got the King of the Ring, you had Lex Luger turn babyface to compete with Yokozuna. They completely skipped over that. Probably a good thing, because Yoko really had to carry that goddamn thing because Lex was not ready and would never be ready to be the guy because he could never be Hulk Hogan because he was Lex Luger. He was always better heel. But now Hogan decided to nuke that whole goddamn thing and torch the entire company before leaving. He felt that he was still a draw. Yes, some of the fans popped at Mania 9. I mean, maybe even a lot of the fans popped because they were like, oh, this is something I expected. And then take a look at what happened afterwards. He didn't really do all that much. He competed against Yoko on an international tour, but would also compete in New Japan and would basically devalue the championship he was holding, that he was the big, that he was the company man for. No, this championship doesn't mean anything. The IWGP Heavyweight Championship has more lineage, which, to be fair at that point, he wasn't wrong about. But still, you're representing WWE, you're representing a company where Vince is paying you a lot of goddamn money at the expense of his own company. Now, Hogan just has to do this and just ruin everything, and then he didn't want to put Bret over because Bret's too goddamn small. Hogan was a goddamn piece of shit for that, and a goddamn piece of shit for a whole lot of things. Yeah, Bret, it's like I thought wrestling had moved past Hulk Hogan. He was right. As much as I know people don't like Hogan or like Bret sometimes, he was right about that. Pritchard tries to justify it because of the upcoming international tour, and then we go to King of the Ring 93. But Hogan couldn't lose to Yokozuna clean. Oh, no, sirree. That would be too sane for Hogan to do that, too rational. A camera bulb, apparently like a fire-breathing camera, just shot out at him. And then, basically, he was hit with the leg drop, 1, 2, 3. And then Bonsai drop, and Hulkamania is dead. And that was it. And then Hogan was gone. And then Hogan went to Turner. And finally turned heel 2 years later, and that actually worked pretty well. Because it was easy to hate Hogan, because he's a fucking prick. Vince talks about how much it meant to the Samoans, and how Yoko winning the championship was a big deal. Now, could you imagine, just a quick scenario, though, before I finish up this review, because it won't take that much longer afterwards, 10 minutes later. If Yoko had won the championship at Mania 9, they hadn't done that thing with Hogan. He had held it till, say, SummerSlam. Luger had beaten him. And then Yoko had beaten him at Survivor Series or something like that. And then Yoko had 2 runs, but he had one run of like 4 months and had another run of like, 5 months, something like that. How cool would that have been? That would have been pretty cool. Or he could have held it from Mania 9 all the way to Mania 10, beating the shit out of everybody, and then Bret would have even been a bigger star there. Now, yes, they popped in Madison Square Garden for he is Bret Hart, and he is my favorite wrestler of all time, and I fucking love Bret, even though there are times maybe he goes a little bit too overboard and taking himself seriously, but I appreciate it. He would have been an even bigger star there. But no, Hogan had to fucking just nuke and char the whole goddamn thing. And it was fucking stupid. Everybody loved him because he was a great guy. And that's, Bret says that. So many other people said that. He helped save Savio's career. He found out that Savio was going to get released. And he said, why would you do that? Savio is just trying to earn money for his family to, do all this. And Savio, got goosebumps. He said, thank you. He always stayed humble. Rikishi tells a story about how he was making money, but he wasn't making great money. He had put everything in his new house, and there was no heat. And Yoko basically handed him a blank check and said, sign it. Just whatever. Do it. Just do it. Just, you know what? We need to help each other out. He did that, and he had heat, and that got to me. If that doesn't get to you, I don't know what will. The family bond, just talking about how strong that was as kids, about how great of a dad he was, even saying a limo to take him to school at one point. The feud with Taker, we hear from Jim Cornette and recent comments from Cornette. You can tell because of how he looks. And I'm not knocking, I'm just glad they didn't use old footage. People bought into it. You could buy into Yokozuna putting a dent in The Undertaker, and even beating him. Taker said he was great to work with. 280 days as champion. Yes, They cut out, thankfully, where about, 8 million people beat up Undertaker and put him in the casket at the 94 Rumble to write Taker off so he could rest and refresh the character and rest his back. By the way, Taker, all lives can't matter until Black Lives Matter, and I'm sure Taker just absolutely would hate seeing that or seeing any BLM, Black Lives Matter armbands, much like he'd hate seeing video games in a goddamn locker room. Because everything was better back then, when people were dying. Like in their 30s and 40s and stuff like that from a whole bunch of drug stuff and everything. Yeah, the locker room was so much better and so much tougher back then, wasn't it? Anyway, back to Yokozuna. 280 days as champion. He faced Luger and, got past Luger, thankfully, because Luger winning the championship would have been stupid. And how dominant of a wrestler he was. Yoko was a total pro there. But then the weight issues took their toll. This is where things get sad. It was affecting his stamina. They teamed him with Owen because he couldn't go anymore. And you could tell. You could tell from like June 94 to about like what I think it was like they wrote him out in Survivor Series in 94. And then you could tell even a few months later when he came back at Mania 11 and Owen teaming with Yoko and they beat the Smoking Guns for the tag titles, you could tell that Yoko just wasn't what he was. It was only a year after defending the championship and losing it to Brett, but still defending the championship in the main event. He was in 2 straight main events, and by the next Mania, he was working the middle of the card. And then by Mania 12, he'd be working the opening match. And it was just really sad. It was a quick descent. He had to travel. He was, traveling was terrible. He didn't like that. I did like his teaming with Owen, but Owen was having to carry like 90% of the match. He couldn't fit in seats. He broke a toilet in an arena. The weight issues were out of control. Mark Henry at first was his go get it guy. Go get a bucket of fried chicken. He was in denial about his weight issues. And then he busted his ankle. And I remember vividly they had to get a forklift to carry him out of there. It was demoralizing. But he always felt he could control it. He didn't feel like he had a problem. He would start to fall asleep and struggle to breathe because, the wind, the air passage would get closed off because of the weight. Company wanted to help him or he'd die. They wanted to basically get him, they had to end up releasing him even though they would do, they want to do it on their dime, but he wouldn't do it. He just wouldn't do it. He couldn't get licensed in New York because he was so big that he wasn't healthy to wrestle. He was released in mid or later 97, and it was tough for him to deal with. He came back to the Indies in 98, middling success. He felt like he had left the family down. That's where it got me because you saw just how much it meant to him and so many others, how much it meant to the family members, and they were like, he never let us down. He never did. We just wanted him to live. It was about his health. It was not about the money. At age 33 in 1999, he moved to Vegas and opened a wrestling school. He would take care of underprivileged youth and just give them a way to train and stuff like that and just get them off the streets. They would sleep in the facility because he knew what it was like to struggle. Nothing against his family. His family always took care of him, but he knew what it would be like if they weren't out, if they were on the streets, and he wanted to take care of them because he was a tremendous guy. He tried to get back to people. And less fortunate. October 2000, he was over on a month-long tour in England. It was October 23rd, 2000. He was tired. He called others. They told him, well, we love you. Go to sleep. And then he died in his sleep. And I remember that. I was 19 years old when that happened. And just, it rocked the world. The endless sadness and frustration. Brett even said, what could we have done to change that? Could we have encouraged him more? Like you play the blame game with yourself. You're not angry at the person. You're sad for the loss, and you just want to know if there was more you could do. And then we get footage of the memorial show, November 29th, 2001, that Offensica put on. A lot of his friends wanted to honor him, like Taker said he had to be there, even with the hectic schedule. Hall of Fame honors and his legacy, and he truly is one of the best big men of all time, and it's fucking sad. It's really fucking sad. But realistically, Yokozuna's legacy will live on, and he is truly one of the best big men of all time. I'm 40 years old, and I remember him vividly as a kid. But let me know your memories of Yokozuna in the comments, please. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.